Hey friends, it's Jean Haley here, your friendly neighborhood natural dye enthusiast. And I just wanted to share with you a few tips about planting your dye garden. When I found out there were such a thing as natural dyes, I was all in, and I've told the story a million times, but I planted my whole front yard into a dye garden. My backyard's not suitable because I have a great big walnut tree. So not only does it cause a lot of shade, but walnut trees can be poisonous to other plants. There are plenty of things that do grow under it, but dye plants aren't some of them. So if you have dye plants, don't plant them under a walnut tree. That's my advice, number one. But in terms of planting a dye garden, if this is your first time, if you're an experienced gardener, then these are things that you probably already know. But if you're not necessarily an experienced gardener, here are some of my top considerations when you're planning your garden. The first one is obviously going to be plant selection. So you're going to want to choose plants that are going to give you the colors that you want. My first ones that I tried to grow were the triumvirate, the indigo, which gives me my blue, madder root, which gives me my red, and weld, Reseda luteola, that gives me my yellow. And these are all three, the ancient dye plants that they were using, way back when. And they are color fast. The weld is the most color fast of all the yellows that are out there. There are tons of plants that give up yellows. Okay. That's the most abundant color that you're going to find in nature for dyeing. The reds and the blues are the hard ones. Anything that is blue that's going to stick and be a color fast dye is going to be from an indigo pigment. So you need to grow one of the indigo plants if you want blue. Any of the blue flowers that you see or purple flowers, you're not going to get blue and purple. That's going to stay from those. That's in a separate class of chemicals, anthocyanins, and they're just not stable. So don't think you're going to plant some pretty blue flowers and get any blue color out of them. If you want blue, then you need to grow indigo, and you need to figure out what indigo is going to work best in your zone, which is another consideration when you're selecting your plants. You want to make sure that it's suitable for your growing zone. If you don't know what your growing zone is, you can just Google USDA growing zone and put in your state, and it'll bring up a map, and you'll be able to locate where you are in that map, and it'll tell you what growing zone you're in. Most seed packets and most websites that talk about different plants, they tell you what growing zone they work in. So you're going to want to get a plant that's suitable for your growing zone. So the indigo that I grow is known as Japanese indigo here. It's Persicaria tinctoria. And it is pretty hardy here. It's an annual. I have to plant it every year. And I started indoors and I transplanted outside. I did a few blog posts on growing my indigo and extracting it earlier on. I'll put a link down. I keep doing this because I'm going to put a link below the video. That'll be easy, but it's pretty easy to find if you just go to the blog posts on how I did that for my indigo. There's a bajillion indigo species that are out there that will give you indigo, but there's only really a handful that will give you enough indigo that it's worth your time. The Indigofera species, you need to be in a pretty temperate climate to grow that. Any of the Indigofera tinctoria, Indigofera subfruticosa, australis, that grows in Australia wild, and which is exciting. And I wish I could just go harvest wild indigo. But yeah, indigo is crazy and it's different than everything else. But figure out which indigo works best for you. Woad is another one. Woad is an invasive species in most areas. In North America, most certainly, and definitely in Canada. It does happen to grow up there quite well, but it is an invasive species. So you want to make sure that you can still grow it, but just make sure that you're going to contain that, which is pretty easy with woad because it's a biannual. The first year is the year that you're actually going to grow. You're going to harvest the plant parts for your dyeing, for extracting and dyeing. And then it's the second year that it sends up its flowers and seeds. So after you're done harvesting your woad for that year, you can just pull it up by the roots and be done with it. And you know that it's not going to then invade the whole area. But these are just some things that you're going to want to know. Is it good in your climate? Is it an invasive species? You definitely don't want to be doing those. Or if it is considered an invasive species, are there ways that you can grow it and contain it and be confident that you're going to be diligent enough to do that? I tend on the lazy side sometimes. And so I know myself, I'm not growing woad because I just don't know that I'm going to be able to handle it. The next thing you're going to want to consider is the soil and sunlight needs for your plants. And pretty much on any seed packet, if you're going to buy the seeds, it'll tell you whether it wants full sun, partial shade, full shade. Very few plants that we grow for dye are going to be full shade. I can tell you that right now. Most of them like the sun a lot, but some of them will do just fine if it's only partial sun. If you only get sun in that part of your garden from 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and then the sun is gone for that particular part of the garden, the plants might do just fine. But just know where what you need to do in terms of that. And in terms of the soil, some plants grow better in an acidic environment, some grow better in an alkaline environment. So just know that about the plant. Again, check your seed packets, or if you buy the plant from a grower, I buy plants from the local farmers market a lot. And I will ask my farmers that I'm buying plants from, is this something that I need to have in full sun? Where will it work best? And that sort of thing. And if you're not sure what kind of soil you have, and I recommend this even if you think you do know what kind of soil you have, because it will change from year to year depending on what you're growing and how you're maybe fertilizing your plants. You can get a soil test pretty inexpensively from any hardware store that has a garden center, or a garden shop, or a nursery where you buy your plants and seeds. Almost all of them will have a soil test, and they have some really pretty simple ones that aren't too expensive. And if you've got kids, it's really kind of fun to do with them because it's a little, chemistry experiment. And so also an opportunity for them to learn a little bit about chemistry and how that's also important for our soil. So know your soil and sunlight needs. Figure out the space planning. Some plants need a lot of space, other plants don't need as much space. So look again at your seed packets, or talk to your growers. If you buy something from a farmer's market or from another store or something, ask them, how far apart do I need to plant these? What's the best spacing for these plants? We need to know whether or not they're going to actually compete with each other when they grow up. So for example, I would not put my weld right in front of my indigo, because weld will grow a big wall of about 6 feet of plants. And so when they get mature sometime in June, then they're just going to shade out everything right next to it that's underneath it. So that would shade out my indigo, which really loves to see the sun. So just think about that kind of thing. You want to think about what your plant looks like when it's mature. How big is it? Where is it going to work? Is it going to shade out something else? Is it going to compete with something else? So just keep that in mind when you're planning where to put each of your plants in your garden. You're going to want to also keep in mind the watering needs for all of your plants. Some of them are really drought tolerant. Other ones are really not at all drought tolerant. Some of them need to be wet the entire time. If you're direct seeding, they might need to be wet all the time before they germinate, and then they're probably okay. But just know these different things about what their water needs are. If you're already an experienced grower, you might already have soaker hoses. I don't yet. I'm hoping to maybe get some this year and put those into my garden. The soaker hoses are great. You can also hook those up to a timer so that it'll just and plug in the date and the time that you want to put those, if you want to have a regular schedule for watering your plants, if that works best for you. Right now I use a watering can for some of them, and I use a hose for others of my plants, but I've just been using a hose for the past 8 years, and it's worked just fine. And it's kind of fun to go out there and water when it needs it. I live in an area where a lot of times I can get away with not watering at all because we get enough rainfall, but there are those years where it's drought, and we can't predict any of that anymore. Am I right? So you just got to pay attention to the weather. And if you're going to go out of town, know if it's going to be a hot, dry vacation, in which case you're probably going to want to enlist some friends or family to water your garden and keep it alive. But yeah, just know what the watering needs are for each of your individual plants. And then the last consideration is the harvesting and the processing. So what's the best time of year to harvest the plant? What's the best time? How should you be processing it? Indigo is completely different from madder, which is completely different from weld. The roots need to be about 3 years old in order for them to give up the good red color for you. So what I've done is I've planted a great big bed, and it'll spread. It likes to spread. So mine are in a bed. If you're going to grow madder, I highly recommend in a contained space, which is what I've done. And then I have a big bed that I have split into 3 sections because we dig up the roots, right? So you've planted this, you've waited for 3 years to get the roots out to die with it. And then you're going to dig up all the roots and you're going to have to wait another 3 years. No, thank you. So what I've done, my first year, I planted out the entire bed. And then on the third year, when I was able to harvest, I just took one section out. keep something there that tells you which section you harvested that year, because I guarantee you won't remember the next year. Maybe your first 3 years you will, but after that, forget about it. You're not, wait, was that the middle section or the left side section, or zoinks? So just make sure you know which section you harvested. But then I just harvest that one section so that the next year I have this other section and then a third section. And then these others, I'll either plant some more seed or they'll just regenerate with the roots that will want to spread out anyway. So that's kind of a consideration. And those roots, so again, you got to wait like 3 years. And the best time to harvest those are going to be when they've gone dormant. So fall and winter are fine, and maybe early spring, but fall and winter are probably the best times for the matter. The weld, on the other hand, is a biennial, and we harvest the second year, and it goes up really tall, this great big flower. And when it flowers, the bees love it, by the way. So it's a great attractor for pollinators because it has a zillion little baby yellow flowers. And when those flowers are just really starting to go, I usually let the bees get at them and get their fill before I harvest them, but I won't let them go too much longer than that. And then I'll harvest them and make sure that the seeds don't go absolutely everywhere, because there are 8 jillion seeds per plant. You think I'm exaggerating, but I promise I'm not. Maybe a little, but not much. Zillions of seeds you get from those plants. And then the indigo, on the other hand, I can get 3 harvests out of in a good year if I have enough time, if I've done, if I planted it indoors early enough and then transplanted it at a good time. And, if my luck is running well, I'll get 3 harvests out of it. But I usually just get 2. And even if I get 1, I'm excited about that because it's indigo and it's blue and it's fun. And I mean, look at some of those things. It's great fun to dye with indigo. So knowing how you actually harvest it and then process it, is it better to use when it's dry? Is it better to use when it's fresh? Almost all of my plants I dry, plants and flowers I dry, because I almost never have the amount of time that I need when the plants are ready to go. And so that's just me. So I almost dry almost all of my plants. The weld, you'll get a brighter yellow if you use it fresh, but if you use it dry, you can still get a really bright sunshiny yellow. So those are the 3 big ones that I grow. Yellows, the other yellows that I grow are marigolds. Those are really easy to grow. I harvest them all summer long. The more I pluck off their little heads, the more flowers they grow. I also grow some cosmos for the orange and some Coreopsis tinctoria, which will also give you some orange. Those are both annuals. And if you're really, really not sure what you want to do and you just want an easy place to start to just give it a go, I also have a quick guide for 7 plants and that are really 7 dye plants that are really easy to grow that I've been able to grow. And the first time I was gardening was when I was doing my dye garden. I'm not like an experienced master gardener or anything. I've just learned a ton each year. Every time I fail, I actually learn a lot. And so if you go in, being okay with, things are going to die or the bugs are going to get it, or you're going to learn so much each year that you plant and keep your garden, that's all going to be okay in the end. But so I have this list, and I'll put a link to it below this video, where you can download a PDF of 7 easy dye plants. And I have the growing zones in there in that table. And then I have a picture of the color it gave me on my wool and a picture of the plant that's in my garden. So, and those are actual pictures from me, from wool that I dyed from plants that I grew. So that will hopefully be helpful too. So again, your 5 major considerations: plant selection, soil and sunlight, spacing of your plants, the watering needs, and harvesting and processing. If you keep those 5 things in mind, you're going to be successful. You're going to get at least 1 plant. And that was my goal. My first year was like, just give me 1, please. And I did. And it was really exciting. And it's so fulfilling. When you grow your own color, it's just so satisfying. I can't tell you how exciting it is how excited I was the first time I harvested my own color. I was just like ecstatic. And everybody, look what I grew this color and it colored my wool and it worked and it's beautiful. So it's super satisfying, and it's a way to increase the sustainability of your own art practice too. So give it a try and have some fun. If you don't have a garden or a yard, you can still grow in pots. Okay. That's still an option. If you want to grow in pots, you can absolutely do that. You don't need a whole big plot. But you also want to keep in mind the watering and the soil type and the sun needs and those kinds of things. You still want to keep all of those things in mind, but you can absolutely grow a smaller amount of plants in pots and still get enough to play with and have fun with. So, all right, go for it out there and have fun.